So on June 6, 2024, Netflix is releasing what might be the most GigaChad anime crossover movie of all time. Hello everyone, I'm Finn. Welcome back to finnfilms. Join me today as we are talking about Netflix's upcoming super hyped anime crossover movie, Baki Hanma versus Kengan Ashura. So without a doubt, I'm pretty sure that the Baki Hanma Kengan Ashura crossover movie will be the most GigaChad crossover in anime history. That's because it features two of the most GigaChad anime protagonists of all time going head to head in Baki Hanma from the Baki Grappler series and Ohma Tokita from the Kengan Ashura series. These two anime have really become like the poster child for like hard-hitting martial arts anime over the last few years since they were both picked up by Netflix. Each of them are hard-hitting, super violent, relatively surprisingly actually pretty accurate martial arts anime with just a little dash of the absurd. The Grappler Baki series telling the story of Baki Hanma, the youngest underground fighting champion who seeks the strongest fighters in the world in order to one day prepare himself to face the strongest creature in the entire universe, his own father. And when I say a dash of absurd, I guess what I really should say is a whole heaping helping of it. For example, these are just a few of the most absurd, crazy things that happen in the Grappler Baki series. Baki fights a 200 million year old primitive man who has been frozen in time. Baki fights a 10-foot tall plus giant praying mantis that he had conjured with his own mind. Baki received arguably one of the biggest power-ups in the entire series after having sex for the first time. Oh yeah, and last and most certainly not least, there's this scene where Baki's own father, Yujiro, the strongest creature in the world, simply walks through a layer of bullet and shatterproof glass. Kengan Ashura, on the other hand, follows the story of Tokita Ohma, a martial artist who strives to be, you guessed it, the strongest fighter in the entire world, a fighter that is forced to compete in fights organized by the Kengan Association, a group of hyper-rich companies from around the world that settle their disputes and differences with one another through a series of one-on-one fights and tournaments between each of the company's respective gladiators. Both of these anime and the web series and manga that they are adapted from are like really classic examples of like the martial arts and like tournament arc anime series, each of them featuring some of the most like insane fight scenes that I've ever seen in like any anime format ever, accompanied by, you know, kind of classic minute-long plus expositions explaining every tiny little detail one could possibly think of how to throw a punch or the intimacy of the fight being displayed on screen. And honestly, I f***ing love it. For example, I imagine a fight between Ohma and Baki going something like this. Ohma lines up, throwing the most perfect punch in human history. The narrator then spends 2 minutes explaining to us, the audience, how he learned this punch, and how truly amazing it was that he has even pulled it off in the fight against Baki, only for Baki to immediately counter with a punch of his own. As the entire audience grows quiet in shock, Baki will monologue to us about how his father, Yujiro, the strongest man in the world, taught him how to punch as a young boy, and how he would spend days perfecting his punches, only for his father to sneer, saying something like, "Any man can learn how to throw a punch. A real fighter learns how to strike." As we suddenly would get a flashback of Yujiro beating the absolute shit out of a young Baki, and this entire sequence would probably take like 10 minutes and would be something like the third or fourth attack of the film. Now, I'm only slightly joking when I say this, but like genuinely it wouldn't shock me if we saw something like this in the Baki Kengan Ashura crossover movie, as that's just the type of anime, the combat sports kind of tournament arc anime that we're dealing with here. And to say that I am hyped like a 10-year-old in 2004 on Christmas who's just received a massive box of Yu-Gi-Oh cards is a bit of an understatement. Okay, so what we know from the trailer so far about the Kengan Ashura Baki Hanma crossover series movie, the movie will focus on the strongest fighters from each of these two shows, from each of these two universes, facing off against one another. Well, I guess minus Yujiro, because That would probably just be cheating and unfair, wouldn't it? From the trailers, we see a litany of fighters from both of these two series, but so far it seems to be confirmed from the trailers that there will be 3 main fights taking place in this movie. The first fight seemingly featuring Sa Pyong from Kengan Ashura facing off against Kaoru Hanayama from Baki. The second fight possibly being Ryan Kyurei from Kengan Ashura facing off against Jack Hanma from Baki. And obviously we have the main event, which features one of the greatest crossover fights between 2 anime pro tags ever, between Baki Hanma versus Ohma Tokita, accompanied in the audience by some of our favorite supporting characters from both series. This fight is super up there on like the levels of like what if fights. Like it's up there with like what if fights like Godzilla versus Kong, Ollie versus Tyson, Goku versus Superman, Krillin versus Tien. Okay, maybe not that last one. The crossover movie is being animated by TMS Entertainment, the studio behind the Baki Hanma animated series, and I think that this is the correct choice, as the art style for Kengan Ashura done by the studio Larks Entertainment is a bit, well, divisive to say the least. So I think that they made the correct choice by going with TMS, as the art style for the Baki animated series is much more palatable for a wider audience. And honestly, I feel like it would be absolutely jarring to see Baki animated in the Kengan Ashura style. Again, we know anime companies love a good crossovers. There's been a ton of wild anime crossovers throughout the years. Off the top of my head, I can think of like the Dream 9 One Piece DBZ crossover had, or a crossover like the Isekai Quartet, which featured 4 different isekais, chibi versions of them with characters from ReZero, Konosuba, Overlord, and Saga of Tanya the Evil, or even the Yu-Gi-Oh! Bonds Beyond Time crossover. This crossover, though, feels like it's on a whole nother level.
That's taking it to the whole nother level.
This crossover is almost more akin to something that you'd see in like professional wrestling, something almost more akin to like the Invasion storyline from the early 2000s, which featured wrestlers from WWE, WWF at the time, facing off against a combined force of wrestlers from WCW and ECW. Or for a more recent example of professional wrestling, any crossover promoting matches between NJPW from Japan and AEW. I don't know what it is about like the what if fights concept, but there's something about it that just turns like normal grown-ass men into like screaming fangirl 12-year-olds, frothing at the mouth, fantasizing about a dream match that will never happen. I mean, for God's sakes, it's been turned into like a whole YouTube genre in and of itself. Like I said, so far from the trailers, it seems like this movie is going to be featuring like 3 primary fights, the final one being the big grand what if fight between Baki and Ohma. I imagine that the previous 2 fights will end up being split 1-1, with a character from both series winning each of the fights, tying the score hypothetically at 1-1, the deciding fight series coming down to Baki versus Ohma. The question then is, what will happen when Baki and Ohma face off? Now, normally, my money would basically always be on Baki, hands down, no question asked. I mean, this is the kid who literally manifested Mike Tyson in his shadowboxing fugue state. But you see, there's one little problem here. I actually don't think that either character is going to win. I know, right? That sounds a bit anticlimactic, but hear me out here. While, yes, this crossover is kind of a dream what-if scenario for fans of martial arts animes, it's also a big kind of glorified ad for both of these franchises. Let's go back to our pro wrestling analogy like for a second here. You see, we are presented with a tough question. How do we make one of these 2 protagonists win in this fight without like completely burying the other protagonist and their accompanying series? Both of these anime are really freaking popular, but I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say that like the Baki series is the more popular of the 2 series. So you can imagine how enraged fans would be if like Baki actually loses. On the flip side though, if Baki wins, then this kind of in a way buries Kengan Ashura as a show and Ohma as a character, and it confirms that Ohma and Kengan Ashura are the lesser of the 2 martial arts anime. So how do you resolve this big fight without pissing off either of these 2 fan bases and burying either of these 2 characters? Simple, really. no one wins. That's right, I have a pretty strong feeling that this super hyped anime crossover will result in some kind of a draw between Baki and Ohma. Either that, or there's going to be some kind of interruption at the climax of their fight, possibly by, oh, I don't know, the strongest creature in the entire world, a man whose back muscles are so ripped they look like the face of a demon, Yujiro Hanma. I know, it's not the most, like, climactic ending to a super hyped anime crossover movie, but I would actually be shocked if the movie ends with, like, either fighter definitively walking away the respective winner. From, like, an anime production point of view, it just doesn't really make sense for, like, either fighter to be declared, like, the clear winner at the end of the movie, as it would possibly have an impact on their respective standalone show. Again, this is just my opinion, and it's just pure speculation. I'm sure the Baki-Ohma fight could end in a variety of ways that actually would feel satisfying to the audience. Maybe I've just watched too much pro wrestling in my life, but I really do have a strong feeling that the Baki-Ohma fight in this crossover movie will end in some kind of a draw or some kind of weird shenanigans. Either way, this doesn't really affect like how hyped I actually am to watch this movie. We already know that it's going to have some absolutely insane, intense fight scenes. I mean, both of these anime and their respective manga and web series have some of the most like realistic, like MMA-esque type fight scenes of like any martial arts series. I mean, yes, they are also absolutely ridiculous and absurd, but really at their core, both of them are pretty extremely accurate in how they depict martial arts, MMA, and how these martial arts are used in tandem with one another and in actual fights. And I think that this is a real testament to like the work that both of the authors of these series have put in. I have no doubt that the Baki Kengan Ashura crossover is going to be insane, is going to be easily the most GigaChad, most hyped martial arts anime crossover of all time. I'm just very curious on how it will actually end. As always though, with these types of videos, guys, these are just my thoughts and my opinions, and again, this is just straight up speculation on my part, so feel free to disagree with me in the comment section down below. Let me know, who do you think will win, Baki Hanma or Ohma Tokita? If you did enjoy this video or learn something new, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, as this is the easiest way to support me, and it also helps to put the videos into the algorithm. If you did enjoy this video, then why don't you check out some of our other anime content on screen now, and as always, guys, thank you so much for continuing to support me. I hope to see you in the next one. Drink your water, hug your mother. Until next time, peace, love, Aru.